It's no secret that the endgame scenario of Total War Warhammers 1 and 2 became tired over time. The predictability of the same event, with the same stacks in the same places being led by the same lords, made it grow stale, and CA's own decision making, such as removing the chaos stacks that would invade via the sea, and thereby making the chaos invasion specifically a Dark Elf and Empire problem, only compounded that issue. Suffice to say then that when variant endgames were announced for Immortal Empires and Warhammer 3, I was thrilled. And they'll have variable difficulty settings too, finally some variety. So why is it then that when I start a new campaign, all of these endgames are now turned off as a default? Why is it that I actually think that for all the apparent effort that was put into the new system, the result is something not only not particularly inspired, but cheap, tedious, unrewarding, and most of all, utterly cynical? Well, let's talk about that. My first time of ever playing through to an endgame actually took a long time. In fact, it only happened this year, because it was only just before Christmas that Immortal Empires was patched enough for it to be worth playing consistently. So I was playing as Tsarina Katerin in a test campaign for my How to Win As guide video when it triggered. Only I didn't notice the endgame triggering. Well, I did when I noticed all the armies, but that was only at the end of the turn. Why? Because the only other indication really was a pop-up notification, and like most players, I seldom read those because they border on being spam and they all start to blend together when you're deep into a campaign. It's all a bit of a far cry from...
Can you feel it? From the north it comes.
Say what you like about the Chaos Invasion, but that cutscene never lost its allure for me, even when I became good enough at the game that it became like a delivery service dropping off free money and experience. The lack of an interesting intro though was just the start of a problem though. The one that really annoyed me was that because I just left all of the options available due to mostly forgetting that endgames are a thing at all at that point, I got a grudge too far. So I spotted a load of armies at Karak Kadrin, my staunch ally, only they were suddenly determined to use my nipples for target practice. I beat the hell out of them for a couple of battles, but then I lost interest in playing on. Not because of the challenge, because it wasn't really stretching me at all, my Kossars were destroying them. I was bothered by the way the chosen endgame lacked immersion. I was playing as Kislev. War with the Dwarfs just felt off. I mean, dwarfs are kind of dickish, so I can imagine them taking offence that the Tsarina's crown makes her appear even more tall compared to them, but it's still a bad fit, and especially bad considering that I'd fostered great relations with the dwarves all the way through the game. It just felt as though a large part of what I'd done for the previous 100 or so turns hadn't really counted. It felt cheap and forced, and that put me off playing, so I stopped and played a different campaign while waiting for the release of the Chaos Dwarfs DLC. And it was after that, while playing the Chaos Dwarfs for the first time, that I decided to turn off endgames entirely from then on. My first Chaos Dwarfs campaign was as Drazoath the Ashen, and I was having a great time. The Darklands, the World's Edge Mountains, the Badlands, they were all mine. No one dared stand against me. Bring on the endgame. And then the pop-up came again, and I noticed that the endgame had started. And it was the dwarfs. Again. Now that's not so bad from an immersion perspective this time, because I was playing as Chaos Dwarfs, and I had plenty of force to get busy with the fighting. However, with this instance, because I'd taken all of the mountains and wiped out so many factions, I was able to finally see exactly how the endgames work. It just brought back all the dwarf factions that I'd already killed off, with stacks of armies, and placed them right by their original starting settlements. There was no feeling of invasion or ingenuity, or the creation of some new threat emerging. It was just the same characters, with more advanced armies in the same places. And once again, it felt as though so much of the campaign that I had fought hadn't really mattered. It was a rewind, like a shitty time travel simulation, or some alternate universe wormhole bullshit from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So once again, I fought a few battles, won them, and then switched off. Next time I played Immortal Empires, it was a new campaign with the endgames turned off entirely, because why bother? All you get at the end is another pop-up message and a record screen. So the culmination of Creative Assembly's most ambitious and successful video game series ever gives your finale storytelling no better or more advanced than you would get reading the final page of a fighting fantasy gamebook that was played with dice and pencil 40 years ago. There aren't even Steam achievements in the game for campaign victories, because apparently even that is too much hard work. The gameplay itself in the endgames is so utterly uninspired. It's just, let's inject a bunch of armies into the game, and even if their factions are long dead, let's just bring them back. There's no narrative structure, no sense of a new master faction emerging. Just here's the same guys who you either killed or ignored earlier, only they have a lot of new stacks now. Enjoy! And that narrative issue extends even further when you consider the sheer laziness and Scrooge-esque penny pinching that has seen them neglect to add a single cutscene for the entirety of Immortal Empires. When you watch the brilliance of the Chaos Dwarfs campaign intro, or the Dark Elf story from Eye of the Vortex, or the Yuri prologue in Realms of Chaos, you see that Creative Assembly absolutely understand the importance of storytelling in Warhammer, and that they can deliver that superbly. So why, given that most of the series has used semi-animated images, which are much cheaper to produce than fully animated cutscenes and work just as well, have CA not included any, even for just the endgame crises of Immortal Empires? Because even that is too much investment for them, apparently. They know that the fan base will let them get away with it, so they offer the bare minimum. Remember that this is a company that basically had to be bullied into offering Immortal Empires to people who have paid a mere £60 for Warhammer 3, rather than the £140 for the whole trilogy. But in a way it actually gets worse. Not only are the endgames lazy and produced with as few frills and treats for the players as possible, but they're actually symptomatic of Creative Assembly's worst sin: cut content. Take a look at the press release for the upcoming Total War Pharaoh. If you pre-order the Dynasty Edition, you're buying all 4 DLCs. Now what does that tell you? Well, it tells me that these DLCs are either mostly or entirely produced already, and that they're just holding them back for additional tweaks and to act as either a pre-order incentive or a future cash cow, depending on how fast you buy and on what common consensus online agrees looks like a Troy reskin. Why does this matter when I'm talking about Warhammer 3's Immortal Empires? Well, let's run through a list of the endgames. We've got Skaven, Wood Elves, Tomb Kings, Greenskins, Vampires, and now Chaos Dwarfs. Okay, fine. Except it's not fine. Think of this. When you're playing as the High Elves, you can't be faced with either of their 2 most iconic enemies in the endgame, Chaos and the Druki. The Lizard Men can wind up facing the Skaven, but not Chaos. The Greenskins can face the Dwarfs and the Skaven, but not the Empire, and so on and so forth. Now you might be thinking, they can add in those later. To which my response is, well, they can add them in this afternoon, because these are not difficult to implement, and I believe there's every reason to believe that CA already have them set up and ready to go. I mean, the Black Pyramid endgame is an obvious dry run for a future Nagash DLC, and he's not even in the fucking game yet. The endgames are just army auto-spawners with associated war declarations. Given the right access, a talented modder could probably add in every conceivable lore-friendly endgame in a weekend. So why aren't they in there already by default? Simple. By cutting them out and adding them in piecemeal, CA have fake new content to offer every time there's a gap between new releases. Community is pissed off because there hasn't been a DLC for a few months? Let's drop in a Druki endgame. Facing some Reddit backlash for something a dev said to Kotaku or something? Time to shit out that Lizard Tide scenario. It's the same mindset that saw them release the Ulrika FL as a fig leaf to cover for the Chaos Dwarf DLC's smaller size and higher price. I mean, if you want to argue that this isn't cut content, let me just cut you off and point out that we're playing the End Times game, even though CA don't dare call it that for fear of boosting the Logan Paul Japanese forest tourism rate among longtime Warhammer fans who lived through that mess as tabletop players. Yet they've actually left out a Chaos endgame that they're obviously holding back for some kind of grand finale. We've had the Chaos invasion in Total War Warhammer from 2016 to 2022, but suddenly they've removed it. What clearer form of cut content is there? The long and short of it is that for all that at the core of the endgame idea there's a germ of inspiration and genuine desire on the part of some devs to really make the game even more fun and immersive, they've been stymied by a lack of inspiration, too much insulation from criticism, and far, far too much of Creative Assembly's by now characteristic money-grubbing cynicism. The latter negative traits need to be called out and not rewarded, while the initial inspiration and will to drive improvement need to be encouraged, because there are definitely devs at CA who would make the game into a smorgasbord of lore-friendly Total War joy if the penny pinchers would just get out of their way and let them do it. With that in mind, in part 2 of this video, I'm going to be talking about ways in which I would improve endgame scenarios, including new options that I feel will aid immersion and bring even more fun to the game. So I hope to see you in that one. I also hope to see you in the comments section talking about what you like in endgames, what you don't like, and how you would improve them. Let's start the conversation today, and I'll see you in the next video.